It was a bit, maybe. During the period when he was Prime Minister, my relations with him were quite prickly. And I found, because, you had to say the Tories were in a mess. I mean, I was blinding the obvious. And he was quite difficult. Immediately after that, everything changed. I remember as soon as the state opening in 97, there was the Speaker had a party, and I was there, drinks party at lunchtime before the formal debate began. And he couldn't have been more charming. And ever since, I haven't seen him very often, but I see him a bit because we're both interested in cricket and so on. He couldn't have been more relaxed and easygoing. The other person who is of course Gordon Brown, who sadly, for all his good intentions, could never relax, and therefore.
But when he did, he was charm personified.
Yeah. I knew Brown quite well in the 80s. I mean, when I was in Washington, the British Embassy in their stupidity never cultivated him when he was shadow trade industry or whatever. So his office would ring me up and say, Gordon's coming through to do a lecture, he'd love to have a meal with you. So I arranged something, and one of the funniest things, we had a meal. He was doing a lecture in Georgetown on a Saturday morning, and he was flying out Saturday evening, and he said, we had dinner on the Friday night, and he said, you do anything tomorrow afternoon? No, not particularly. And he said, well, let's go around the bookshops. And for him, that was the policy bits of the bookshops. And roll on to when he was Chancellor, we were just chatting, and we were doing an interview with him. And he said, oh, funny, I put on an old coat on the weekend, Peter, and in it was letters we'd exchanged about the books I got in Washington. That was Gordon at his best, but he didn't have the cynicism which Blair had. Blair's relationship was much more cynical in a way. I mean, but he was much more relaxed. I mean, I found Blair, I used to see Blair quite a lot when he was Prime Minister, and he was. You knew you were being used, but he was very good at it. Gordon was always tense.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about America, because you talked a couple of times about covering American politics. Were you offered the job, or did you actually sort of keep pestering to say, let me do this?
I didn't pester, actually. I would have done if it had. Now, I was offered it earlier than I expected. That I'd fallen in love with America aged 26, 27. And I'd gone over, and this was the time of exchange control, so it was quite tight. And my first afternoon there, I was walking around in Washington, and the helicopter landed on the ellipse, and the president, who was Jerry Ford at the time, got out. So the next trip I did was the then US editor, a guy called Ulrich Martin, great guy, knew I was coming on holiday, said, we'd like to spend a couple of days on the campaign trail. So I covered the campaign train from New York via Pittsburgh to Chicago. So that was Jimmy Carter the first day, Fritz Mondale, who sadly recently died, and Rosalind Carter. We ended up with the original Mayor Daley greeting us in Chicago. I mean, and then I got the train from Chicago to New Orleans, and there was Jerry Ford with Ku Klux Klan demonstrators in Louisiana. I mean, you couldn't not. And I went back for all the campaigns, and I saw Reagan in action, and I say brilliant campaigner, and so on and so forth. So I'd fallen in love with American politics then. What happened was, after the 87 election, there'd been a bit of a shift around in the FT. A guy called John Lloyd, wonderful journalist. He was due to go to Washington, but for some reason, I can't remember what it was now, couldn't do it. So I was known enough, not put in immediately, because I had a good, very good man who should have been there longer, actually, because he did a perfectly good job. And they said, well, we want you to go in 18 months' time, which is a ridiculously long time. So this was June 87, after the election. They want you to go at the end of 88. So, but go over some of the election in 88, which I did. I went to conventions and all that stuff. Heard one of the worst speeches ever made at a convention by the governor of Arkansas, one Bill Clinton. And started at the end of 88 and I covered the elder Bush. So if it hadn't happened, I would have pushed for it. But funny if it happened.
And that's Peter Riddle. You can hear my full hour-long interview with him on the Ian Dale All Talk podcast, or you can watch it on the LBC YouTube channel. We filmed it as well. Coming up in a moment, you'll be able to put your calls to the Israeli ambassador. She's sitting alongside me in the studio now. The number to call, 0345 6060 973. This is LBC. It's 8 o'clock.
On your radio, on Global Player, and Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, coronavirus vaccination is being accelerated in parts of Lancashire to tackle the Indian variant of COVID-19. Downing Street says all measures are being considered as a way to limit the spread of the mutation in some areas of the UK. Boris Johnson says he's anxious about the variant, but England's roadmap is still on track. Dr. Raghib Ali is clinical epidemiologist at the University of Cambridge.
The good news, of course, is that in the UK we have one of the highest rates of vaccination in the world. I mean, more than 60% of adults have been vaccinated, more than a third have had both doses. So it's going to be much harder for any of these variants to spread in the UK. And the key, as you mentioned, really is to get that vaccination up as quickly as possible. So this kind of idea of surge vaccination in all adults, I think, is the right way forward.
David Cameron has been questioned by MPs about his lobbying for the now-collapsed financial firm Greensill Capital. The former Prime Minister has admitted he had a significant economic interest in the company, but insisted his work was not motivated by personal gain. Mr Cameron says his lobbying the government was never intended to be part of his advisory role.
What I did at the time of economic crisis was put to the government what I genuinely believed to be a good idea for how to get money into the hands of small businesses and get their bills paid early. I've said that, looking back and now looking forward, ex-prime ministers are in a very important and different position, and so a single letter or email would be more appropriate.
The UN is warning violence in the Middle East is still escalating with the potential to turn into a war. Dozens have been killed during fighting between Palestinian groups and Israel. A number of UK flights to Tel Aviv today have been cancelled. Trains withdrawn for safety checks last weekend have been cleared to return to service. Great Western and LNER timetables have been disrupted following the discovery of cracks in several carriages. Engineers have determined the fault doesn't pose a safety risk. Everton's hopes of qualifying for Europe next season suffered a setback. They were held to a goalless draw by Aston Villa and remain in 8th in the Premier League. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed down 41 points at 69.63. The pound buys $1.40 and €1.16. LBC weather. Showers dying out for most of the UK tonight. Rain continuing in parts of central and southern England and South Wales. Cool in the north with a low of 4 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm David Dom.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Ian Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 3 minutes past 8 on LBC. You can watch this next hour, if you'd like to, on Global Player or the LBC YouTube channel, Facebook page or Twitter feed. And the reason that you should do is because we have got the Israeli ambassador with us today. Tzipi Hotovely has been in London about 6 months now.
Yes, fresh, new.
And how are you finding it?
Now much better, because lockdown is over.
Yeah, well, we're getting there, aren't we?
Yes.
Well, of course, the reason that we're talking about Israel tonight is what's been going on over the last few days. And obviously, the violence seems to be increasing day by day. And I've seen that you've done lots of television interviews over the course of the last few days. So I thought we'd do something a little bit different. We'll talk for the next 10 minutes or so, and then we'll take calls from listeners. And the calls are already lining up. If you'd like to take part in the programme and put your question to the Israeli ambassador, 0345 6060 973. It feels like Groundhog Day to me that we've been here before over the last few years, that you have one side doing something, the other side reacting, then the other side reacting, and the violence gets worse and worse on both sides. But this is a little different, isn't it? There's a lot of street violence going on now. Now, in your own words, how do you think this started?
Well, I think that it's actually very easy to explain. What happened here is that Israel is being attacked by a radical terror organization named Hamas. Britain is recognizing Hamas as a terror organization. The United States is recognizing Hamas as a terror organization, and it sits on Israel's border. Now, so far, there was a competition between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, who's the leader of the Palestinian people. And they've been divided between Gaza and Judea and Samaria, what is called here the West Bank. And I can tell you that a political decision of the leader of the Palestinian Authority, Abu Mazen, to cancel Palestinian election that they didn't take for the last 10 years, made Hamas been really upset about that because they wanted to take control on the Palestinian people leadership. And they made a decision to create those provocations in Jerusalem in order to achieve power and in order to take over the leadership of the Palestinian population. So all I can tell you is that the Israelis shouldn't pay the price for this debate in the Palestinian leadership. That is, it's one of its ingredients is a radical terror organization that wants basically to have replaced a democratic country like Israel in Islamic State.
But in terms of what's happened over the last few days, surely this has been provoked by two things. First of all, the forced evictions in Sheikh Jarrah, and second of all, the entry of Israeli armed forces into the Al-Aqsa Mosque. That is what's provoked people, isn't it?
This is the misperception. The Sheikh Jarrah is a case in court. It's been going on for years. So it's not like it started today or it started last year. It's not anything immediate. This is something that is debating in court. We need to make the courts to make a decision.
But people have been evicted, haven't they, from their houses?
At the moment, no. At the moment, everything remains the way it was because Israeli Attorney General asked to postpone the verdict, and the court case at the moment is being delayed. So this is anything that's happening at the moment.
So the pictures that I've seen in the press are not true?
Many times you have pictures that when you don't have the real big perspective, you cannot really understand who's fighting who. So let's go back to Temple Mount. So 80,000 Muslims were on Temple Mount today and during all Ramadan. So Israel always provided freedom of worship and freedom of religion to all religions, and Muslims definitely had peaceful, quiet years throughout all those last years because Israel always provided security protection to all the people coming to worship. This year, what happened is they've decided to create Ramadan, to make from Ramadan a day of provocation because they started using violence as a result of Hamas incitement. And what we've seen is young people piling rocks in Temple Mount, piling explosive products like Molotov bottles in order to throw them on people that were just innocent praying in the Western Wall, which is a Jewish important holy site of prayer. And those kind of things we cannot accept. So you need the police to make sure that no violence will be part of the holy place.
Was it necessary for Israeli soldiers to go into the Al-Aqsa Mosque, let off stun bombs on the day before Eid? Was that really necessary?
First of all, it was the police. It was the police.
Right, police, whoever. But if it had been the other way around, and people had gone into synagogues.
So let me ask you a question. Let's say on a holy place in Britain, either a mosque or a church, you know that there are people who want to use violence with violent tools. Would you just let them to act in violence, or would you send the police?
What evidence was there that there were these Molotov bombs or whatever inside the mosque? What evidence do you have for that?
Oh, we have videos. Everything is documented. Actually, even, I don't know if on LBC I can say it was on BBC, but everything is documented and was broadcast all around. We have the videos. Everything is in social media and on regular television. You can see everything. You can see the violence that was really being, created on the ground that was hurting Jewish innocent people.
There is a school of thought that thinks it quite suits Mr. Netanyahu and it suits Hamas for this to be happening because we all know that there is no formal Israeli government at the moment, and Mr. Netanyahu is trying to form one. For him to be the tough guy, to talk tough, it maybe gets people back on side who were maybe drifting away. I see Mr. Bennett today has come back on side to Netanyahu. And for Hamas, it suits them for every once in a while to have a conflict, to let the rockets off, because it bolsters their support within Gaza. It gives them a reason for being, almost. Now, that may be a cynical way of looking at it, but when it suits both sides for this to happen, you can kind of understand how it's come about.
So in order to have this kind of very strange interpretation, you need to understand where Israeli people are at the moment. Israeli people at the moment are really upset and angry. They want the government to fight for them, not to create a situation where they're being attacked in rockets. It's totally insane for any Israeli prime minister to ask for a war. And actually, all the actions that Netanyahu was doing as a prime minister were to de-escalate the situation, to reduce tension, and even in the price of making a very unpopular decision, like, he didn't allow Jews to go on Temple Mount on Jerusalem Day. This is a very unpopular decision, and he made that in order to create some kind of message that he wants to de-escalate, that he wants to reduce tension.
It's been reported that Hamas offered a ceasefire through the Russians, which has been rejected by Mr. Netanyahu. If he wanted to de-escalate things, surely he should have accepted a ceasefire proposal.
No, because Hamas at the moment doesn't say that he doesn't want to fire on Israel because he still has the arsenal, still has the capabilities. So what we will have as a result is Hamas will say, okay, stop now, and 2 weeks from now we'll be under attack again. So Israel is not interested in things that are not sustainable. And we would like to have a sustainable solution to the fact that our cities are under attack. Over 1,000 rockets, and 80% of our population, millions of people being in shelters, including my own family. Those are kind of things we cannot accept, and no other country would accept.
Why did the IDF pinpoint a tower block in Gaza, which housed media organisations yesterday, and the whole tower block was destroyed?
In general, the way we work in Gaza is we always target military targets. We never target civilians, never. Many people think, like when they see those buildings going down, that it has civilian population inside. They're all empty because...
Well, they're not empty because that had lots of media organisations. Now, there may have been a warning and the people may have been able to escape. But why attack a block full of media organisations?
Oh, it's very simple, because this is the problem with a terror organisation. They've been hiding behind children, women, schools, hospitals, media organizations.
But that's an argument to attack any building.
No, I'm saying again, the fact that we're attacking a building is because we have information that there is military capabilities of Hamas there. If you see that civilians are involved, it's just because Hamas is using those civilian facilities in order to hide behind and using those people as human shields.
The Public Security Minister, Amir Ohana, is reported in The Guardian today as to appearing to encourage mob violence. Their words, not mine. They say that he called for the release of a Jewish man arrested in connection with the fatal shooting of an Arab man in the city of Lod after a synagogue and other Jewish property was torched. He said, without providing evidence that the shooter, quotes, acted in self-defence, he added that law-abiding citizens carrying weapons were an aid to authorities. I mean, that is encouraging mob rule, isn't it? Basically encouraging ordinary citizens to carry weapons.
I can tell you that in Israel, as opposed to America, it's not that common to have weapons. And I can tell you that we will make sure that no one will use violence. And this is what the Prime Minister said.
He's encouraging people to use weapons.
I can tell you what my Prime Minister said. I cannot, justify everything that every minister says in Israel, but I can definitely justify what my Prime Minister said, that he wants everyone to make sure that no matter what happens, they cannot take the law to their hands. And this is what the Prime Minister delivered as a message, and I can repeat on that. We have police. This is their duty to make sure that law and order will be back. And at the moment, some of our cities, unfortunately, were attacked by some Arab people that have decided to create vandalism and brutal things that we used to see in Europe many years ago and we're not interested to see in Israel.
Final question for me before we come to calls. You're on Twitter. You see the accusations against Israel. That the common theme nowadays seems to be that it's a state that indulges in ethnic cleansing and is an apartheid state. Now, when you look at the proposals to, and in fact in previous times, for Palestinians being removed from their properties, not having exactly the same rights as Israeli citizens, do you understand why people can use that word in a way that obviously you will reject, but it's becoming quite commonplace now to accuse Israel of being an apartheid state?
I can tell you that never in my life I heard some bigger lie. But let's speak about the facts. You've been to Israel. You know how Israel is. Israel is a democracy. Actually, not long time ago, the third largest party in Israel was the Arab United Party. So if they're speaking about any unequal situation. They need to bring proofs. They need to bring facts. No one is bringing facts or proofs because there is no. Arab citizens, women and men, have equal rights in Israel, equal representation in Israeli parliament, equal representation in all, places of leadership, like the Israeli Supreme Court. We are proud of that. We are proud of our democracy, and we're proud of our coexistence. At the moment, radicals are trying to shatter this coexistence and trying to incite and to say Israel is now into a civil war. We're not interested in that. We think this is the worst thing that can happen in Israel. And we really are calling, as a leadership, as a responsible leadership, to the Arab leadership to come and call the people that are now marching the streets and calling to kill Jews. Stop this violent speech. Stop this violent action. You need to say something clear. We built so much together in 73 years. Continue this coexistence.
Well, I'm sure we're going to get a few calls along those lines in a moment. So if you'd like to put your question to the Israeli ambassador, 0345 6060 973. And as I say, if you'd like to watch our proceedings, you can do so on Global Player or the LBC YouTube channel, Facebook or Twitter feeds. It's 8:16.
This is LBC. Leading Britain's conversation. Ian Dale. Tweet at LBC.
It's 90 minutes past 8 on LBC. We are in the company of Tzipi Hotovely, who is the Israeli ambassador to the Court of St. James. That's the actual formal title, isn't it?
The formal title, indeed.
Right, let's go to your calls. Yusuf is in Harrow. Yusuf, you phoned in last night, and I said I wanted you to put your question to the ambassador, so we've kept our promise. Go ahead.
Ian, good evening to you again and to your listeners, and thanks very much for inviting me back to speak. Ambassador, on equality, I think context is extremely important. You believe that every inch from river to sea belongs to you, and the Palestinians also believe it's theirs too. My grandparents lost their registered land and homes in Jaffa, Safed and Jerusalem. Neither of them was granted restitution, nor were they allowed to return. But all Jews have an automatic birthright and Palestinians don't. My living grandparents are actually both older than the State of Israel, and we view this lack of equal treatment as inexcusable injustice. So there's no parity here, and not addressing what many rightly see as the root cause will actually lead to perpetual conflict, in my opinion. So my question to you is this. Would you support my family and people in our situation going back, or deny our rights of return? And if not, then why?
Hi, Yusuf. Thank you so much for asking this very important question, because it gives me an opportunity to share with you something that actually is denied from history, or at least from the history you tell to yourself. Over 1 million Jews were expelled from Arab countries, and they had to find their refuge in Israel. Jews from Morocco, from Iran, Jews from Egypt, Jews from Syria. All of them were expelled. And it was a whole process of Jews leaving their property, leaving everything in those Arab countries. Never got restitution, never had the right to bring even their property or anything else. This was a result of a war. I want to go back to the reason why we got to the point where Israelis and Palestinians were in this, I would say, clash. The UN resolution, the very famous one, of, as you know, made a decision about having an Arab state next to a Jewish state. The Jews said, yes, please, let's live together, a state by state. Between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean, we can live together. As you know, the Arabs, you can call them the Palestinians, they refused to accept that idea and started a cruel war. Well, 10% of the Jewish population was killed, brutally killed.
But we can't go back into the whole history
of
this dispute.
I'm just explaining why this idea is not based on any other case study in the world. 1 million Jews were expelled, and they weren't allowed either to get property or any rights.
That's a good reason, though, for you to understand the Palestinian case, though, surely. If Jews were expelled from lands which they regarded as their own, the Palestinians have been expelled from land that they regard as their own, surely there has to be a degree of mutual understanding there.
No, because you cannot fix the mistakes the Arab people made throughout history, because the State of Israel was established, and as you know, there are equal rights to any Arab in Israel. And if
property rights, though.
What?
Not property rights.
Of course, property rights. Come on. I mean, half of the country belongs to Arab families in the Galilee, in Haifa, in Jerusalem. What are you talking about? If you're an Arab, you can have a Jewish property wherever you want.
Of course, yes, you can, but look at what's happened in some of the settlements where Palestinians, Arabs, have been displaced.
This is a total misunderstanding of the legal case. There are certain legal cases about Jewish population that had rights, legal rights on the property. It's a whole legal debate. But it's a legal debate that I could have had with another Jew who has more ancient rights about certain real estate in Israel.
Okay, well, let's bring
Jews
Yusuf.
and Arabs can have the same rights about
property.
property.
Let's bring Yusuf back.
Yeah.
Yusuf, final word from you.
Yeah. Sorry, I do disagree with quite a lot that's been said, but I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty here. All I'm going to say, though, in response to that, is the laws that Israel uses as the basis of their legal system are skewed towards Jews and not non-Jews. So anyone can research the nation-state law, but I'm not going to delve more into that. I just did have a small kind of point I wanted to make. So, you mentioned a lot that, there's a lot of violence, right? Nobody actually wants violence. And the latest or last major confrontation was actually in 2014. The question is then, are you blame the Palestinian leadership? What have you done to, during the relative calm, to improve the situation? You built settlements, demolished homes and villages, etc., etc. And you're saying the Palestinians don't want to negotiate, but it doesn't help Israel, doesn't let Palestinians in Jerusalem vote in their own scheduled elections. So how can you speak to their representatives when they can't even elect them? That's my question to you.
Okay.
But this was the Palestinians, the leaders, that made a decision not having the election. It wasn't an Israeli decision. So all I can tell you is you can ask the Palestinian leadership why they refuse time after time to have election, but they refuse to have an election.
Okay.
But if we go back to your point about settlements, actually the Gaza case...
I will put that point, because one or two people are saying, why haven't you got the Palestinian ambassador on as well? Well, we have put out an invitation to him, and we're hoping to get him on, hopefully on Monday next week. So we can put that question to him then. Yusuf, thank you. Let's go to Imran in Chadwell Heath. Hello, Imran.
Good evening, Ian, and thank you for taking my question today. Ambassador, I'm going to jump straight into it. You have in the past described yourself as a religious right-winger, and in 2020, at a Board of Deputies event here in the UK, you described the Nakba as a very popular lie, which a lot of Muslims and non-Muslims would describe as a very racist viewpoint. Based on that very extremist position, what is your position on the two-state solution? Do you believe in the two-state solution?
I said in the past, I keep on saying that again. I'm a big believer in peace. Israel always wanted to promote peace with all its neighbors, and we have a proof. We have a peace with Egypt, with Jordan. We just signed 4 new peace agreements with 4 more Arab countries in the Gulf, with Morocco, with Sudan. We are very much proud of the fact that Israel always seeks peace and wants to have a peace. But in order to achieve peace, you need to have direct negotiation. So what happened in the last few years is that the Palestinians refused basically time after time to accept the two-state solution. Every time they've been offered in different formulas of the international community, being involved by Americans, Tony Blair, a British Prime Minister, was involved. Any formula that was on the table around a two-state solution failed. They always said no. 6 Israeli prime ministers offered that. All leadership, all different leaders Palestinians had during this time.
But what's your view? He's asking about...
My view, because it didn't work, it's about time for us to rethink.
So you think the two-state solution is dead?
Is failed.
Dead.
Failed, and the Palestinians never accepted it. They never were really interested in this solution. And I think we need to rethink on a new solutions, creative one, pragmatic one, realistic ones, because we really need to have coexistence between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean.
So do you think there should be one single state?
Look, I'm an ambassador. I can only speak on behalf of the policy of my government. When I'm describing that it failed, this is basic, description of the history. But if I'm looking at the future, I'm very much open to creative solutions, any kind of creative solutions, anything that will stop bloodshed, will make us live together, have prosperous economy that will be combined like we have in some areas of Judea and Samaria. I'll be more than happy to see Palestinians living next to Jews, happily living together like we had in many Israeli cities. And you have no idea how much I'm sad to see those sites from Israeli cities that for many years were a symbol of coexistence, like Lod and Haifa. And I would like to see a better future for our children.
Imran, that wasn't the question that you told us you were going to put. Would you like to put the one that you told us you were going to put?
Sure. Well, the ambassador did partially answer it, and I'll get the gist of her answer, which is that the Israeli government doesn't want to accept the ceasefire offered by the Palestinians through the Russian diplomats, and I think that's a big shame. Does she agree with the War Minister's comments, Benny Gantz, that there is no plan to end the ceasefire and that this is going to be an ongoing process, ongoing conflict?
Well, I'm saying again, what we want is that our people, the Israeli people, will go to work, kids will go to school with not having this fear and this threat of rockets being thrown on Israel, being fired on Israel. Once we will get to the point, the military infrastructure won't allow Hamas to launch rockets on our cities, we will stop. Because if Hamas would have stopped firing, we would have stopped firing, but look at today. They keep on firing and targeting kids, targeting schools, targeting kindergartens. Just 2 days ago, there was a rocket that hit school, elementary school. Hundreds of kids could have died. The only reason they didn't is because we didn't allow them to go to school because this threat, and we told them to be in shelters.
This is an argument for perpetual conflict, isn't it, though? Because if there isn't a ceasefire, and we hear that the plans are being drawn up for a ground invasion of Gaza, I mean, who knows whether that they will be taken seriously by the government, but they are apparently being drawn up. I mean, that would be really ratcheting everything up, and there would be thousands and thousands of deaths, and of course, and Israel would be held responsible for that.
I'm saying again, we are not interested in war. We're not interested, of getting into this circle of attacks going on from Hamas. But in order to be in this point where we can be safe, we need to see Hamas military capabilities not being in action. And at the moment, all the solutions are being on the table are not real solutions. They are just plasters for deeper problem. And we need to have the deeper solution to our people, because unless we will do that, Israeli people will be killed. We're not interested to having civilians. We just had this 6-year-old boy. And again, as a mother of children, I can tell you every loss of a child and every human life is a tragedy. But you need to remember, if Hamas wouldn't have started this horrible attack of thousands of rockets, we wouldn't have been in this war.
But obviously, the death of any child is tragic. A 6-year-old Israeli boy, that is indeed a tragedy. But what about the 20... children in Gaza that have been killed over the past few days? I mean, don't they deserve a mention as well?
Of course. I said every loss of every human life is a tragedy, but you need to understand that Hamas need to be blamed because many of those kids were killed from misfired rockets. We have that documented now, proven that some of those rockets that are being misfired are killing them. Look at this.
I think the 300, have actually fallen within Gaza.
Exactly. And some of them are killing Palestinian population because, again, they don't care. They're using those kids as human shields.
Right, we have half an hour more with the ambassador. Keep your calls coming in. If you don't get through first time, do try again. 0345 6060 973. It's 8:32 News Headlines on LBC with David Dom.
Boris Johnson has refused to rule out new lockdown restrictions to tackle a rise in cases of the Indian coronavirus variant. The Prime Minister says he's anxious about the mutation's spread in the UK. David Cameron has told MPs he was paid a generous amount to work as an advisor for Greensill Capital. He's insisted his lobbying for the company was in the public and not personal interest. The UK has joined international calls for an urgent de-escalation of violence in the Middle East. Dozens have been killed during fighting between Palestinian groups and Israel. LBC weather: showers dying out for most of the UK tonight, rain continuing in parts of central and southern England and South Wales, cool in the north with a low of 4 Celsius.
This is LBC. At on LBC.
It's 8:35. Let's go straight back to your calls. We're with the Israeli ambassador. Natasha is in Kensington. Hello, Natasha.
Good evening. Madam Ambassador, I would like to know why you think it's not being reported that this latest round of violence is not some spontaneous escalation, but a planned escalation by Hamas as a result of internal Palestinian power struggles between Hamas, Islamic Jihad and Fatah. Hamas has been stockpiling missiles and rebuilding its terror network with Iranian backing since the last conflict in 2014. And of course, let's not forget the 37 rockets that were fired by Hamas on the 24th of April. Instead of responding then, Israeli politicians opted for restraint and, well, we all see where we are now.
Well, Natasha,
I think that's what's called a friendly question.
A friendly question indeed. Natasha, first of all, I must tell you that I've been saying this on British media since I started making interviews about this very, very sad event that we are inside at the moment, this attack about Israel. But you're absolutely right. When the media is presenting it, they don't always do this framing. And it's really important to give this political background. You're absolutely right about the fact that Israel didn't respond on the 40 rockets that were being fired on our cities. It was before our Independence Day, actually. How symbolic. So the truth is, this is part of our really big motivation to de-escalate. And we are doing sometimes things that are not being accepted by the Israeli people because they want us to respond whenever their life is in danger, and they're absolutely right. But it was the Israeli government really restraining itself and to saying to the Arab-Palestinian leadership, we are here to be in quiet as long as you're not firing. But they continue firing, and this is the result.
Do you think the British media is biased against Israel? Because a lot of Israel's critics in this country think that the whole of the media is within the control of the Israeli government.
I'm sure they don't. Look,
they genuinely do.
The British media is very famous for being critical to everyone, I think. This is part of your claim to fame, isn't it? You've been critical. I've been watching British media since I arrived. You've been critical to your own politicians. You've been critical as a journalist should be. About the Palestinian issue, I do think that this is our duty to bring the information. And about the framing, I think many times when we see Israel getting into this circle of war, the fact that the Palestinians at the moment are being controlled in a certain point in Gaza by a terror organization is not being emphasized. People are speaking about the fact that the poor people in Gaza Strip, and they forget to mention that their leadership is the one who's causing this whole problem, because they keep on fighting in Israel, even though there's zero settlements in Gaza. Israel made a very... It was almost a civil war in Israel when Arik Sharon decided to withdraw from the Gaza Strip, uproot 8,000 Jews, no settlements, just in order to achieve this peace and quiet as everyone promised him. And we got more radicals on our border, and we got more rockets on our border. And this is the sad thing about it. And again, we need to understand we're dealing with terror organizations.
Right, let's move on to Akib in Kingsbury. Akib, what's your question, please?
Good evening, Ambassador. Good evening, Ian, and thank you for taking my call. Terrible situation that's going on there. What I want to say is I fully understand that the Israelis have a right to defend themselves. Every sovereign state has a right to protect its people from those who want to harm them. But say Hamas were to lay down their arms tomorrow, and the Israelis would agree to do the same. Tomorrow is Friday, so it would be Good Friday, a Good Friday agreement. Fine. Now what?
I see what you did there.
No, I'm smiling because the history of the Good Friday Agreement, of course.
Right. What next, Ambassador? What do you expect the people of Gaza to do? How can they rebuild their lives to live in peace with their neighbours? It's not exactly a picnic down there in Gaza at the best of times. So what does Israel envisage that they should do? And to what extent, if at all, would Israel be prepared to help?
What's the name of...
Akib.
Akib. Thank you very much for this question. When Israel made the withdrawal from the Gaza Strip in 2005, everyone said Gaza will become a Middle East Singapore. They all wanted to adopt the Singapore model, and they thought it will be a wonderful place for tourism next to the seashore, and it will flourish and everything will be great. But the sad news are that no matter how much money the international community is investing in Gaza, and it's investing in order to help the Gazan people, as long as we have this radical regime of Hamas, who has horrible ideology. It's not like they're shooting and firing just to reach some political solutions.
But they were democratically elected initially, weren't they? I mean, we do have to remember that.
In 2006.
Yeah.
They were elected. And I'm afraid, again, if they will stop firing, I'm sure we will stop firing, but they need to make sure that they will stop firing, not just for now. But
isn't
firing.
Surely also part of the problem is the fact that Gaza is effectively under siege. Israel controls the borders, it controls electricity. I read today that the electricity supply to Gaza is almost running out. They've got 5 I can't remember what the word is, generators, let's call it that, and only one of them is working at the moment. The water supply is controlled by Israel. I mean, at some point, surely, if things are to move forward, Israel has got to make a gesture and relax some of the controls, because that's the only way that Gaza's ever going to prosper, apart from Hamas obviously reciprocating in the same way.
Again, this is not about economic solutions. Economic solutions can always be found when the Gazan people would like to live peacefully with us. But at the moment, this is not the reality on the ground. The reality on the ground is the fact that Gaza is a place that is launching rockets daily basis, 10 times a day on Israeli cities. Think about London, Liverpool, Birmingham, Manchester, all the big cities of Britain being under fire. Would you be imagining of thinking how to help this terror organization, or would you think how to stop firing in order to make your people live in peace? This is the reality.
Well, let's move on to the next question. Thank you for that, because it's kind of related to this. Larry is in Southport. Larry, what would you like to ask?
Good evening, Ambassador. First of all, I'd like to offer you my sympathy and the Israeli people my sympathy for the terrible reign of terror that's been rained down on you with the Hamas terrorist rockets. My question, Ambassador, is this. Do you believe that the only way to deal with this, to stop this reoccurrence year in, year out, is actually to go into Gaza, to invade Gaza and to take Hamas out, to destroy all their capability for firing rockets, their factories, everything? And maybe then a new democratic government will come in Gaza and improve the lot of the Gazan people. So, Ambassador, do you think that's the only way to deal with this for once and for all, to go into Gaza?
Dear Larry, as a person who's now representing the diplomatic part of Israel and not the military, I mean, if you would have been spoken maybe to our chief of staff in the army, he would have told you what's the best way to do it. I don't sit in the cabinet. All I can tell you is what our goals. Our goals are to bring peace and quiet. This is the decision makers at the moment, the Israeli government, who should make the decision what's the best way to do it. As far as I know, what you were suggesting is not on the table. What we want to do is to target, as I said, Hamas, all the places where those rockets being launched from, and to destroy all Hamas capabilities in order to prevent future attacks on Israel.
But that's been tried before and it hasn't worked, hasn't it?
All I can tell you is 7 years of peace and quiet is a lot.
Well, you still had rockets over those 7 years. You didn't destroy the rocket-making capability in the last round.
I can tell you that part of it is the fact that we want to minimize the fact that we don't want to harm civilians. And part of fighting places being controlled by terror organization is the fact many civilians are surrounding those military centers.
I sense, and I may be wrong here, but I sense you have a bit of frustration about the fact that you aren't able to express your personal views, and you are here to express the views of the Israeli government, because you are quite. I've been reading about you. You're quite hard line, aren't you? I suspect you would have quite liked to answer Larry's question in a more positive way.
No, I must tell you, I don't regret not being from Israeli government, because I want to represent a bigger scale of Israeli people. This is a big a big, I would say, privilege to represent the entire country, a country that I'm very proud of. So I was a politician. If I would like to get back to political statements, I will do that after being a diplomat. At the moment, I'm a diplomat. I'm very proud of it, very happy about it.
Someone says on a text, I'd like to call in, but your number isn't going through. That's because so many people are trying to get on. We've got 15 more minutes with the ambassador. We'll try and rattle through 3 or 4 more questions if we have time. It's 8:46.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast, LBC.
Police in the dock over their handling of the Sarah Everard vigil on Clapham Common.
The last thing these grieving women should have been met with was visible manhandling by male police officers. I'm genuinely shocked by what I saw.
A dozen teenagers stabbed to death on London streets already this year.
An 18-year-old has been stabbed to death in East London, bringing the total number of teenage stabbings in the capital to 12 this year.
And warnings of an e-scooter crime wave set to hit London this summer. Lockdown might finally be easing, but the questions keep getting tougher for Dame Cressida Dick. But what will you ask the country's most senior police officer on Call the Commissioner here on LBC tomorrow morning from 8?
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Listen live on Global Player, LBC.
Welcome.
This is LBC with Ian Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
It's 10 to 9. We have time for, I hope, 3 more questions to the ambassador. David is in Victoria. Hello, David.
Hello, good evening. I would just like to ask the ambassador, what would she do if she was born Palestinian and lived in Gaza? In other words, if the situation was reversed, what would she be doing? Can she imagine what it's like for the other side? Has she any empathy at all?
Of course I have empathy. I have empathy for people that can't live in peace with us. I wish we could cooperate. Again, I'm saying from Israeli perspective, we would like all the region to flourish. I can tell you that as a woman, I would have probably felt that I don't have equal rights. I'm not living in democracy. And I would have liked to choose different leadership. This is the only thing I can say, because I'm a woman. I want to live in a place that respects my gender equality, like Israel, a real democracy that cares about what I think. This is what I would have felt probably if I was in a place being ruled by a radical terror organization. But the only thing I think that can help us now is that those radicals will realize Israel is there to stay. You cannot change the Middle East map by firing rockets, and they need to stop
David?
violence.
Yes, I understand that. But didn't Itzhak Rabin, wasn't he in the middle of negotiating peace for land, and he was murdered for his trouble by an Israeli?
I think Itzhak Rabin was a leader. Of course, the tragedy of the fact he was assassinated is a horrible thing. But Itzhak Rabin was not the only one who was trying to achieve peace. Actually, all Israeli leaders were trying to reach peace. I think that Israelis always believed in peace, and we still believe in peace. But we are realistic, and we know that terror organization like Hamas, that its ideology and its manifesto is destroy Israel and not to recognize the right of a Jewish state to exist. This is not kind of thing that you can have political solutions with, but you can have understanding that Israel is there to stay, so it doesn't worthwhile to keep on firing.
David, thank you. Let's move on to Erin in Scarborough. Erin, what would you like to ask?
Oh, good evening. What I'd like to ask the ambassador is if she feels that Hamas actually represents the Palestinian people in Gaza. Do the Palestinian people actually feel that Hamas represents them, or are they coerced, manipulated, rather like the IRA in Northern Ireland, and there's a lot of fear around that? Are they representative?
That's an excellent question, because I'm sure many people ask that. So I can tell you, first of all, they were elected. It's not like they took control. They were elected in elections. And part of the reason that the Palestinian Authority refused to have an election at the moment is the fact Hamas was getting stronger in the Palestinian street. So I don't know. I cannot speak on behalf of the Palestinians in Gaza, of course. I'm the Israeli ambassador. But at least as a matter of historic fact, they were elected. And we didn't see, I would say, different trends among Palestinians when it came to Hamas leadership. But I prefer truly invite a Palestinian in Gaza. He will tell you what he thinks about Hamas leadership.
Or she.
Or she.
Erin, thank you very much. Let's move on to Faris in Ealing. Hello, Faris.
Hi.
Hello, what would you like to ask?
So, Miss Ambassador, I've been listening to you for the last hour or so. You've been lying quite a bit, but I think we'll be spending an eternity here trying to debunk that, so I'll just ask my question. My question is, even though we know that under international law, transferring a population into occupied territory, which East Jerusalem is one of those, is illegal. Your government is currently pursuing removing Palestinians from their homes in order to return the homes to its supposedly rightful owners, who were Jews before 1948. So my question is, since you seem to care about who the rightful owners were prior to 1948, will you be removing Jews in Israel from their homes and returning those homes to their rightful owners, which are the Palestinians?
Let me say again about the Sheikh Jarrah issue. It's basically asking about Jerusalem, Sheikh Jarrah. Again, I'm not interfering, and this is not the Israeli government role to interfere in the decisions that a court will make. And you're making, I would say, a presumption that this is a governmental decision, but it's actually the court's decision. So all I can tell you is all Arab Israelis have equal rights in Israel. No one is transferring anyone. The last people that were really transferred were Jews being uprooted from their houses next to Gaza in order to achieve peace. And unfortunately, it didn't bring the right results. So last time that I remember Israeli government uprooting people, losing their homes, it was Israeli people, Jews. This is what I can tell you. And again, I really feel bad for the fact that this issue of Jerusalem is being manipulated as if this is the reason they've been firing rockets on our cities. This is not the reason. The reason is because they refuse to accept the idea of a Jewish state in the Middle East, and this is unfortunate.
Faris?
Well, again, she's continually lying. In fact, the vice mayor of Jerusalem.
You can have a difference of opinion, Faris, without accusing someone of lying.
No, but there's a difference of opinion, and there were just blatant lies, right? And so, it is part of the mayor of vice mayor of Jerusalem actually admitted that it was part of a wider strategy to remove as many Palestinians as possible to entrench the Jewish presence in Jerusalem. And also with regards to the Gaza issue, now we all know that was a pragmatic choice, and it's a very nuanced issue. But again, she's taken a reductionist view in order to promote her ideas. But you didn't answer my question. So I spoke about Yehuda. My question was specifically about the homes of the Palestinians before 1948. The rightful owners of these homes are the Palestinians. Will you be removing Jews from these homes? Will your courts be removing Jews? You've set a precedent. You're setting a precedent now, which is that the homes should return to the rightful owners. Is Israel going to be returning the homes of the Palestinians to the Palestinians and removing the Jews that live there right now?
If I was a judge, you could have asked me that. I'm an ambassador. I can tell you about what's the policy. This is a legal question. It's based on evidence. It's not based on ideology or government decision. So you need to be a judge. You need to have the evidence. I'm a jurist.
So are you really saying that there's no political influence at all, or no political decisions on settlements, on people being removed from their homes? No politics at all?
I'm saying again, there were many political decisions about uprooting Jews from their homes in order to achieve peace, as it happened in 2005. And in the history, when Menachem Begin signed the peace agreement with Egypt, also Jews were uprooted from their houses. This is what I can remember. But having Jews this is something that's important to say. This is among policy of all Israeli governments. Jews are not being called settlers. They're indigents. This is a land, Judea and Samaria, that Jews belonged for 4,000 years. And history proves the fact that we always have connection.
I mean, that's not what the UN says, of course, is it?
Well, this is a legal debate about international law, but I think no one denies 4,000 years of history. We were just having this chat about how Israel is full of Jewish history through its archaeology and rocks. So,
okay, let's just get a final call from Abbas in Redbridge. Abbas, what would you like to say?
So, firstly, I'd just like to say I am incredibly shocked at just how ill-informed the ambassador of Israel is. I'd just like to read you a little quote from Noam Chomsky. You take my water, burn my olive trees, destroy my house, take my job, steal my land, imprison my father, kill my mother, bombard my country, starve us all, humiliate us, all but us. But I am to blame because I shot a rocket back. That just about sums it up. Just about everything you've said, Ambassador, I've fact-checked you on ifamericans.org, written by Western academics, by the way. And just about everything you have said.
Abbas, we need to get to your question because we've nearly run out of time.
I will do. Has the ambassador looked at the map of Israeli territories and Palestinian territories since 1947? Because if you were to do that, what you would find is an absolute land grab. 95% of the Palestinian lands are gone. So her speech, which sounds very much like a nice...
Abbas, I need your question, otherwise we're going to have to finish.
Okay, I'll complete it. Sorry, Ian, I'm rather upset about this. Is the United Nations wrong? Is Amnesty International wrong? Is human rights wrong? Is B'Tselem wrong when they all condemn Israel for illegally occupying Palestinian land?
Ambassador?
Okay, so many times when we're speaking about international law, and I'm saying that as a jurist, we have the legitimacy to claim that we think that Israel is working according to international law, and there are many famous jurists that can support that. And all I can say...
ignoring hundreds of UN resolutions, I mean, how does that fit in?
Again, our duty is to say the truth, the historic truth. Jews always belong to the state of Israel. There are two different issues. One, what is the future political solution between Israelis and Palestinians? And one, does Jews have historic connection to the land of Israel? And the answer is yes. For
so do Palestinians.
Years. We don't deny their rights. We don't deny the fact that they live in the land. And we never offered any idea of having Palestinian free zone, just like many times the Palestinians offered that certain areas should be free of Jews. We never offered that. So actually, my approach was always coexistence. We need to learn to live together and build together our economy in order the whole region to flourish.
Now, 6 years ago, I hosted an hour between your predecessor, Mark Regev, and the Palestinian ambassador, Manuel Hassassian, who we spoke to on the programme last night. Would you be prepared to do a debate with the Palestinian ambassador?
I don't know. Let's see. I think things should calm down at the moment. I'm not sure I'm willing to debate now with anyone. I'm willing now to...
Well, you debated with our listeners for the last hour. Yes, of course.
This is not a debate, actually. I'm listening.
Okay.
I'm listening. I would like to see what makes them upset, what makes them happy, what they want to know more, what it's not clear about our policy. This is why I'm here. I'm here to listen and to have an interaction and a dialogue. I cannot promise you I will come on a debate because at the moment we're in a war.
Well, I'm going to make it my mission to persuade you over the next few months or maybe even years, who knows. We will hopefully be speaking to the Palestinian ambassador at some point on the programme next week. Tzipi Hotovely, thank you so much for joining us over the last
hour.
Praying
for peaceful days.
Well, indeed, I think we all are. In a moment, we're going to be joined by John Apter. He's chair of the Police Federation of England and Wales, and he'll be taking your calls as well. You're listening to LBC. It's 9:02.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, Boris Johnson says the government is ruling nothing out in tackling the spread of the Indian variant of COVID-19. Additional coronavirus vaccine clinics are being set up in parts of Lancashire in response to a local spike in infections. Scientific advisors have been meeting to discuss the situation. The Prime Minister has stressed England's planned easing of the lockdown is still on track.
It is a variant of concern. We are anxious about it. It has been spreading. Now, at the moment, there's a very wide, range of scientific opinion about what could happen. But